Good afternoon. The DA says it's going ahead with an application under the Promotion of Access to Information Act to try and get the report compiled by the panel that interviewed candidates to be the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the panel had found that none of the candidates were suitable. As a result, he bypassed the panel and appointed SIU head Mothibi to take over at the NPA at the end of January. The Justice spokesperson for the DA is Glynnis Breytenbach. Glynnis, good afternoon to you. Why do you want to see the report of this panel?
Hi, Stephen. Well, I think it's in the public interest, for starters, to see the report. It was such a fraught and flawed process. A panel that was set up to fail, didn't have the required expertise. The process that was started off in the middle of December, when we've known for 7 years that Betoy is leaving at the end of the month, despite urging the president many times prior to December to start the process. It was this rush job that was, that eventually was botched, or very predictable. But the important thing is that the National Director of Public Prosecutions is an incredibly important position. And of course, it is prerogative constitutionally to appoint somebody. It's what Jacob Zuma did, and we all know what the results of that were. President Ramaphosa, when he took office and appointed Betoy, he followed a very laudable public participation process, which he didn't have to do, and to his credit, he did, and everyone praised him for it. And since then, we've been trying to move along an amendment to the appointment process that would cause this public participation process to be the norm. We haven't gotten as far as we'd like to for various reasons. And so he did it again now, much belated and a very, as I say, deficient panel. But nevertheless, he followed that process and then just went ahead anyway and appointed whoever he wanted. Now, the fact that he appointed Mothibi is encouraging. Advocate Mothibi is ostensibly a good person for the job. He's been successful at the SIU, although the jobs differ quite markedly. But just because we're happy with Mothibi doesn't mean that we're happy with the process. We're not. And we don't want the process to become entrenched. We want a proper public participatory process that's transparent and that brings a result that everybody is comfortable with. And this process did not. So two of the people who were interviewed have already been interviewed once before. One of them heads the investigation directorate of the NPA. We need to know what was wrong with these people. Why were they not suitable? Herman Cronje has a wealth of experience. Andrea Johnson has a wealth of experience. Once they put Menzi Simelane on the list, of course, the whole list became available to review and contaminated everybody on it. So there's that issue, But nevertheless, I think South Africa is entitled to know these people who applied for or were nominated for this high-profile job are going to pop up elsewhere in life. We need to know what the deliberations were and what the outcomes were. The appointment process of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, despite the constitutionally empowered appointment by the president, it's still required to be a rational process. And on the face of it, this process is not rational, anything but. So we need to examine it, and we need to make sure that everything is above board.
Okay, it's interesting what you say, that you believe there were some strong candidates there. I think many people had similar views, whoever they may have been for. Do you accept that the panel report did come to that conclusion? Do you have any reason to believe that, in fact, it came to a different conclusion and that's been suppressed?
Oh, no, I would have been astonished if it came to any other conclusion. Bearing in mind how the panel was constituted, bearing in mind the rush job of getting candidates, and the way that they weren't selected. As soon as you have a panel that thinks it's okay to put Menzi Simelane on a list for the national director, him being the architect of state capture in the National Prosecuting Authority 12 years ago, that whole process then, became extremely problematic, and so again, rationality is key, and it's a public process, and the public is entitled to know what goes on. There are other questions that need to be asked as well, but they won't be forthcoming from the report of the panel. But I think South Africans are entitled to see what the deliberations were, and to be comfortable that the process can pass muster as rational or not. And then, of course, there must be consequences for that. And the starting point is the report of the panel.
I mean, you make the point that some of the people interviewed in the panel may pop up again in public life, and I think that's likely if you consider their track records. The argument from the presidency makes the same point, but seems to go the other way. They say that because those people could be considered for other positions, the findings here could hurt them in some way. It's interesting how they see it completely. They make the same point as you, but come to the completely opposite conclusion.
Yes, well, that's extremely worrying. If you want to put yourself out there for public office, such as they have done, then you must be prepared for scrutiny. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. You must be prepared for scrutiny. We all get subjected to it. And again, these are people in public office. They get paid with taxpayers' money, and the taxpaying public of South Africa is entitled to know who they're paying and what for.
There are various other things that are very interesting about this whole process because of the way it was done, because you could also argue it doesn't matter what the report actually says because we all saw the testimony for ourselves. And if I were to argue against you, that is what I would say. I'd say we all saw the interviews, we all know what was asked, we all know who did the asking, we all know how it was answered by each candidate. So why does the report actually matter?
Well, the report matters because there's a panel of so-called, I don't know, let me not go so far as calling them experts, but a panel of people that were put together by the president in his wisdom or lack thereof, that were supposed to evaluate those candidates. So we also, all of the people on the panel occupy public positions. It's, again, in the public interest to know how they applied their minds to the evaluation of each candidate. All of this matters.
In other words, it could matter if someone who's a justice minister liked a particular candidate or didn't like another, in other words.
It could be very important.
You are going to, I presume, follow this process. There's an application. I think, if I remember the process correctly, they get 30 days to reply. If they say yes, great. If they say no, you then appeal that process, and after that, it all goes off to court. Is that how you see it playing out?
I do. I do. That's how I see it playing out.
Okay.
Good way to start the year.
Well, at least you know what you'll be doing. The other thing, and I do want to go back to this because you made this point about how to force more transparency, because you are, of course, correct. It is under the law as it currently stands, the president can literally appoint someone to be the National Director of Public Prosecutions, so long as it's a legally rational decision and they're suitably qualified, and there's been endless case law in some of those aspects.
Sure.
As I understand the way things are going to go from here, Andy Mothibi is, and I think you were the first to mention it, he retires in 3 years. If my timeline is correct, that takes us really with beginning of 2026, beginning of 2029, maybe end of 2028, we need a new NDPP. And unless there's a dramatic change, in fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa will be the president then to make yet another appointment. Do you have any optimism at all that there will actually be a change in the law by then?
Well, certainly we're going to push very hard for it. We've got, certainly, I've got a private member's bill that's in the works. The Department of Justice is also busy with amendment legislation. Hopefully, sanity will prevail and we'll be able to find each other somehow in this process and amalgamate all the good points out of the two pieces of legislation and actually pass it to get it done. It's certainly in everybody's best interest, in the public's best interest, in the best interest of the National Prosecuting Authority to ensure that the very best process is employed to find the very best person for that job.
Okay. So you say you might have to go to court action on this PAIA application. Glynnis, I have to ask, you enjoying being in the coalition?
It's a lovely day in Cape Town.
Glynnis Breytenbach, thank you very much indeed. The Justice spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance was not the answer I was expecting, but I think you know the message that she was meaning to send. Glynnis, thank you.